It's a phenomenon that's been reported as far back as the 16th century, but it exploded in prominence starting in the 1980s. To date, over 20,000 crop circles have been recorded, with the vast majority of these forming in fields of cereal crops across England. However, these mysterious pieces of geometric artwork have appeared as far away as Southeast Asia, and even Native Americans have spoken of them in their ancient lore. For years, there was only one clear answer as to what made these mysterious and complex shapes in the fields of wheat, canola, rye, and other crops. It was the work of an advanced alien intelligence, trying to communicate a pressing message to the human race. Believers argued about the meaning of the circles. Were they plans for a new power source, or perhaps the fabled flying saucers seen by hundreds of thousands globally? Or were they some sort of coded message? The debate raged back and forth until the mystery was put to rest in 1991. Doug Bauer, 67 at the time, and Dave Chorley, 62, admitted to a reporter that starting in the late 1970s, they had started to create the strange formations. The method was simple. All it took was a wooden board tied to a bit of rope. Moving into a crop field under the cover of night, the duo would use the plank to stomp down the crops, and with the aid of a prop that they could anchor into the ground, they could use a string to guide themselves around an anchor point and thus create perfect circular patterns. The duo came forward after becoming alarmed at the rapid spread of copycat efforts and the burning public interest into the mysterious phenomenon. Phoning a newspaper to confess, they not only demonstrated their technique, even fooling an investigator who was convinced it was the work of aliens, but showed their stash of over 200 crop circle designs that they had worked on over the years. The designs were stored in a shed on Mr. Bauer's property, and they were significantly aged, lending credibility to the hoaxer's confession. The prank flew under the radar of prominent investigators like Pat Delgado, who had co-authored multiple books on the phenomenon and was convinced it was the work of alien intelligence. The newspaper that broke the story got Delgado and the hoaxers together to investigate a recently formed circle, and Delgado immediately recognized the men. They had been present in the immediate aftermath of many of the circles that Delgado had investigated. Now he knew why. They had been responsible. The duo created a small group known as the Circle Makers and undertook the task as an expression of art. According to them, they were intrigued in how much power their anonymous creations held over the population. The group added new members as old ones retired and kept the phenomenon going on for years. But the growing spread of copycats seeking to profit from their infamy concerned them greatly. The crop circle mystery had been forever solved, and all who believed the complex shapes and patterns were the work of non-human intelligence were proven fools. But was it solved, really? If you ask websites like JSTOR Daily or Live Science, then the mystery is wrapped up, complete with a neat little passive-aggressive headline indirectly calling anyone who believes otherwise a complete fool. And to their credit, along with the rest of academia, if you ignore all other evidence that you don't like, then yes, the mystery is completely solved. All crop circles are hoaxes. But that's not the way one does science, at least not if you're serious about being intellectually honest. And the fact is, there are some very confounding data concerning crop circles that so far defies explanation. Even the most hardcore believers in crop circles as a non-human phenomenon will admit, at least after the confessions by Bauer and Chorley, that a significant amount of crop circles are man-made. Groups of hoaxers have been caught, both in the middle of the act and after, and with American farmers being significantly more armed than their British counterparts, perhaps it's no surprise that the majority of crop circles appear in England. Even a study of the geographic distribution of crop circles lends credence to the hoaxing theory. The majority of crop circles are formed near main roads, in areas of medium to high population density, and close to significant cultural monuments such as Stonehenge. This indicates that hoaxers are both creating crop circles where it's easy to access large fields of crops and that they want their artwork to be seen. However, those data points also fit the widely held theory amongst crop circle believers that the formations are messages from a non-human intelligence. After all, if you're writing a message to humans, then you're inevitably going to do so where they'll be able to spot it, even if they're on foot. That's why crop circles routinely appear on flat land between hills where observers can have a vantage point, or directly on hillsides themselves, offering the people below a view of the formation. Aircraft are typically dispatched after the fact to collect aerial photos and video evidence. Both sides have a valid claim to these data points, but the evidence against hoaxing goes much further than this. The technique for hoaxing crop circles is well known and has been replicated around the world. It's surprisingly simple and primitive, which might account for some crop circles reported as far back as the medieval ages. Though only a few records remain, it's unknown how prevalent the phenomenon was back then, as there would have been fewer people to see them, no way of collecting aerial photography, and little interest from people who were mostly concerned with not dying from dysentery. To create a hoaxed circle, a flat board is used to gradually push the crops down flat, exerting pressure low across the stem of the plants to ensure they remain down. A team of two can create some impressively complex structures in just a few hours of nighttime cover, and additional tools that can be anchored to the ground, or just having one person remain standing in the center of a formation holding a piece of string makes accurate circular shapes possible. But the evidence against crop circles being hoaxes comes directly from the impact that this method has on the crops themselves. First, there's the obvious. Hoaxers often leave tracks and footprints that are easily spotted. Evidence of their stomping through a formation is evident from splotches of mud or dirt visible on the stems of plants as they step over them, or the wooden board which pushes into the dirt and then into a fresh stalk of crop. These telltale signs are much more visible when the field has been recently watered or in moist conditions, but the disturbances of the crops themselves becomes apparent even in dry fields when investigating the push-down crops. The process of pushing down the crops with a wooden board, however, leaves another telltale sign, the crushing and the breaking of the crop stem as it's forced flat. As the hoaxer progresses along the field, they also inevitably step on the heads of the crops, leaving them bruised, crushed, or otherwise damaged. On close inspection, the destruction is evident for anyone to see. And here is where a closer examination of anomalous circles reveals why they couldn't have been created in this same manner. Anomalous circles often appear only in the span of a few hours, though some crop circle enthusiasts claim that they have held fields under observation only to have a pattern emerge in a matter of minutes when attention was shifted elsewhere. Farmers themselves have attested to these formations appearing very suddenly, leaving them skeptical that a group could have infiltrated their fields and carried out a complex operation in just a few hours. And complex is the key, because while most early circles were relatively simple, as evidenced by Bauer and Chorley's work, they soon exploded in complexity to truly astonishing levels, such as this formation spotted in 2002 or this one in 2009. Upon inspection of the crops themselves, researchers have discovered that there is no evidence of crushing of the plants. Rather, the crops seem to have been bent of their own accord, often at nearly 90-degree angles. The head of the crop and the entire length of the stalk is left unharmed and free of obvious breaks that the destructive hoaxing technique causes. But there is damage to the crop of a completely unexpected way. The first group to conduct a scientific study of the phenomenon was the BLT Research Group, which is dedicated to crop circle studies and worked with Michigan biophysicist W.C. Levengood. He examined hundreds of different plants taken from both inside and outside of the crop circle formations and inspected them under a microscope. He discovered that there is a consistent abnormality in the membrane that surrounds a stalk's seeds, with the enlargement of the cell wall pits. Further, the stem nodes, or those knuckle-like protuberances that run the length of a plant stalk, were discovered to be enlarged by as much as 172% versus control samples and samples taken from outside of the crop circle formations. Some of the crop circles investigated also featured plants whose stems had pronounced bending, usually at the lower stem nodes, along with node expansion. This bending was compared to natural bending caused by the plants naturally reorienting themselves to sunlight, and was considered anomalous when occurring in the recently formed crop circles. However, it's the extreme bending near the bottom of the stem that's considered the hallmark of a genuine crop circle, as plants such as canola and rapeseed will break well before reaching the 90-degree angle required to form the crop circle through mechanical means. Canola plants will typically break at just 45 degrees, and their heads are particularly vulnerable to crushing damage. And yet, crop circles in canola fields routinely feature no evidence of breaks and no damage to the plant head. The discovery of crop circles during late summer season only makes hoaxing even more unlikely. Early in the season, when it's wetter, some crops could be bent without breaking, but by late summer, crops dry down significantly, making them vulnerable to breaking. Another abnormality is the presence of burst nodules along the stem, which is not visible in man-made crop circles. Typically spotted on the second node below the seed head, the phenomenon appears most prominently in younger, more green crops. It's caused by the rapid superheating of water inside the plant stem, leading to nodes bursting from the steam pressure. Curiously, this is not seen near the top of the plant where the growth is younger and the plant fibers are more elastic, but rather near the bottom of the plant with older, less elastic tissues. This is believed to be caused by the use of high-power microwaves, no different than those used by your microwave, and the vaporization of internal water makes the plant stem pliable, likely explaining why anomalous circles feature few, if any, cracked stems. Even more evidence against physical hoaxing comes from discoveries on how the plant reacts to whatever force it's being exposed to during circle formation. When a crop circle occurs before the flowering of the plant and the development of the seed, the rest of the plant will continue to grow normally, but the seeds will either fail to form or grow with significant deformations. This is impossible to attribute to mechanical hoaxing procedures and strongly supports the theory that microwave radiation is being used to create anomalous circles. If a circle occurs when the crop is at a later growth stage and with forming seeds, the seeds themselves will bear evidence of the force used to create said circle. Here, the developing seeds will become stunted, display physical abnormalities, be underweight versus a control sample, and either fail to germinate or display reduced germination. In mature plants with fully or nearly fully developed seeds, a variety of effects are witnessed. In plant species that have a great variation in growth at different stages, the variation will mysteriously vanish. Instead, all of the affected seeds will germinate and grow in a synchronized manner, evidence of something tampering with the seed's normal growth parameters. But it's the effects on mature, fully formed seeds that is the most startling, and the greatest argument against hoaxing. These seeds will feature explosive growth, with a significant increase in a growth rate up to 5 times their normal, unaffected counterparts. Seeds near the center of a formation display this characteristic far more prominently than those at the edge of a formation, which will still outgrow those outside of the formation entirely. Why is this slam dunk evidence against hoaxing? Because money. Evidence from some crop circles clearly shows node length changes in affected crops that decrease from the center of the circle out to the edges in a precise and predictable manner. These changes agree with the Beer-Lambert principle, which describes the absorption of electromagnetic energy by matter, lending credence to the idea that microwave energy has something to do with the formation of the phenomenon, though it may not be the only form of electromagnetic energy at work. The type of microwave energy required is not exotic, and in fact, researchers and believers alike will agree that human hoaxers could very well devise some method of generating microwaves to create this effect. The problem is that no hoaxers ever have come forward to show that they are in fact doing this, and it would require the construction of a device that can affect a formation as large as 100 feet across. This would require a significant power source, and while it's perhaps possible that today this could be accomplished with a large drone fitted with a magnetron, again, nobody has come forward to display such a tool, and the original study was conducted back in the 1990s, before commercial drone technology was available to the consumer. Circling back to the money, though, the evidence showing that mature seeds experience explosive growth means that anybody faking crop circles is passing up a billion-dollar opportunity for the sake of a few lulz. Such dramatic growth rates could add to the number of yields in a single growing season, or even make year-round farming possible in some areas of the world. It's a billion-dollar opportunity being wasted by hoaxers for the sake of laughing at a few UFO believers. Or maybe it's not a hoax at all, because none of the evidence points to anomalous circles being reproducible by humans. Or are they? In 2002, the Discovery Channel ran a special on crop circles and recruited a team of 5 MIT students to hoax a crop circle convincingly. The students were given 3 criteria of a genuine crop circle: elongated plant stem nodes, expulsion cavities in the plant stems from water turning to steam, and 10 to 50 micro-diameter magnetized iron spheres in the soil, distributed linearly, a discovery from soil samples of anomalous circles. The students built a microwave device and even a device to shoot out iron particles, successfully creating their crop circle and triumphing for all of science over pseudoscience. The mystery had been solved by a bunch of graduate students, except it hadn't. And TV editing trickery as well as overall intellectual disingenuity, once more painted a false picture of the results. The students claimed to have replicated expulsion cavities using their microwave device, yet the audience was never shown a close-up of any of the affected crops. Instead, only a distant shot that made it unclear if the nodes had in fact experienced the signature explosion associated with steam under pressure. The team also failed to create magnetized iron spheres, typically discovered in the soil of anomalous circles. Instead, the show displayed iron shavings that the MIT students had simply spread around the formation. The students had been shown microscopic photographs of what they were supposed to replicate, and yet no similar photographs of their iron shavings were ever made to prove that they had succeeded in creating the magnetized iron spheres found in real circles. Further, the iron shavings that the students sprayed into the field did not match the linear formation of magnetized iron spheres in anomalous circles. In short, the MIT team had completely failed at all of the criteria presented to them and yet declared victory. This is indicative of a wider bias amongst academia toward anything not in the mainstream. As we mentioned earlier in the show, if you ignore all the data you don't like, then it's safe to say that any mystery from a UAP to crop circles or even Bigfoot is resolved. When researching the BLT study that discovered the anomalous properties of crops inside of real circles, the most common critiques were as follows. 1. They focus on a correlation between effects but not causation. 2. There's a conflict of interest because the group is invested in crop circles and makes money from publishing books on the phenomenon. And 3. If there was any scientific merit, then the rest of the scientific community would jump at the opportunity to investigate it. Yet this is in no way valid criticism. To address point 1, if an unknown force is at work here, then determining causation becomes nearly impossible without further research. On the second point, Jacques Cousteau made money from his numerous documentary films. By that criteria, his research is questionable. And on the last point, the stigma of anything outside of, quote, normal and the very real presence of deep scientific bias and ridicule culture both easily explains why no serious research has been performed on the phenomenon. It's no different than the establishment science continuing to denigrate any who research UAPs, despite the US Congress initiating multiple new programs into the phenomenon, and congressmen themselves such as Representative Matt Gaetz stating that they have witnessed definitive evidence of non-human vehicles recorded by military recon platforms. The greatest condemnation of mainstream science, though, as so often comes down to this simple fact. To date, there has not been one single attack levied against the actual results of examinations of affected crops from anomalous circles. Instead, the attacks by academia are always levied against individuals and groups, or the evidence is simply hand-waved away or outright ignored. Just like in our earlier Live Science and JSTOR daily examples, while we encourage you to investigate, you'll find no mention of unbroken stems, burst nodes, or abnormal seeds. As is so often the case, it's not in the data, it's how we feel about the data. Now go check out Soviet declassified UFO encounters revealed, or click this other video instead.